Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Anthony Hinnon, Pennsylvania reporter for the Center Square. Joining me today is the Center Square's Pennsylvania editor, Kristen Smith. Kristen, we are late on the Pennsylvania budget, but it seems like we have some, if not progress, at least some drama happening. What is going on, and why is school choice at the center of it all?
Well, as we've been reporting on for the last few weeks now, Shapiro and legislative Republicans came to a deal on a brand new scholarship program in Pennsylvania. Not brand new nationwide, but brand new here, that would provide state-funded scholarships for kids in low-performing school districts. And Shapiro went on Fox News to talk about how he supported this. He was all over the place with how much he supported it. They struck a deal last week on the very final day of the last fiscal year, which was June 30th. To make this a reality. And it was part of a $45.5 billion spending plan. And notably, with that scholarship program, the rest of what's in the bill was very much what Shapiro wanted. I mean, you had a huge education spending number for traditional public schools. There was, DEP permitting reform, workforce training and development. I mean, there's just all these shared goals. The spend number was much higher than Republicans would have liked, but they were getting things in return that were a big priority. Well, then House Democrats kind of picked up their toys and walked out of the sandbox and said, we're not considering any deal that has lifeline scholarships in it. And their argument is that's taking money away from public schools, and that's egregious, it's unconstitutional. And so Shapiro, for all intents and purposes was, he'd kind of already made his choice. And then on I wouldn't say the 11th hour, but on the fifth day after the budget was due, he comes out and says, oh, well, I guess I'm just going to strike the $100 million I wanted to spend or agreed to spend on these scholarships, and we'll keep the rest of the budget because what's in it's really good. And that way, Democrats will vote for it and we will end this impasse. And obviously, Republicans felt double-crossed and betrayed. The Senate had already left Harrisburg and wasn't coming back till September unless some kind of deal had happened. Well, this is not a deal that they obviously care about. So, words out like that they're going to stay out until September potentially, because guess what? That budget deal that is now been passed, that Shapiro has promised to line item veto, can't go anywhere until the Senate signs it. So they can be very petty if they want and not come back. And it looks like at this point, while tensions are high, they're not going to do that. And on top of it, it's not like you sign a budget and that's that, everything's done. We have these things called code bills. And what they are is essentially the bills that tell the state how they can spend the money that's in the budget. So for education, for example, in that education code bill is going to be directions about, okay, this is how we spend the basic education line item. This is, how the formula that we use to send it to different school districts. It's very convoluted and complex, but it's a really important part of the process. So even if that bill found its way to the governor's desk, there's still no agreement on these code bills. And again, they're going to be in the hands of the Senate. So this impasse is far from over. The final budget, it's going to look different than what passed in the House yesterday.
So I guess there's two veins here. The Senate is out until September. So are we just cruising for a few months, essentially until the fall, until we get a finalized budget? And what does this portend, in the future, as far as, how willing Senate Republicans or Republicans in general are willing to work with the House Democrats and the governor?
So it's entirely possible that the Senate does not come back to session until September 18th, as they are currently scheduled. Certainly, they will take some heat from that, from the Democrats, because they're going to be blamed for holding up the budget process. However, you listen to legislative Republicans talk, and they are, for lack of a better word, pissed. They, said that Shapiro has clearly not negotiated with them in good faith. He obviously doesn't respect the trust and honor of a handshake deal. They are wounded and they feel burned twice now, because if you recall earlier in this year, we came to a standstill in the legislature when everybody adjourned because short-term Speaker House Speaker Mark Rozzi said, we're not doing anything until you make a concerted effort to have a special session on a botched constitutional amendment for child sexual abuse lawsuits. And so we're kind of back in a similar situation, even though the specifics and details in it have changed. But again, we're at a gridlock. We're at a standstill. There's partisan bickering over it. At the heart of it is now the trust that was already kind of shaky since the beginning of the year is completely gone now. And it's an interesting development considering that Shapiro really built himself as a moderate, someone who's going to reach across the aisle. And it seems like with this school choice proposal, he was really sticking to his word and doing that. And I think there's not just Republicans who are burned by this, but there's, advocates and everybody who's kind of in the state government orbit that supported school choice is really feeling defeated and alarmed by this. And, how, in the words of Representative Grove, who is the Republican chairman for the Appropriations Committee, which is arguably the most powerful committee in the legislature, he's saying, he's like, where do we go from here? If we can't even trust that the deal that we made with you, you're going to keep. I mean, he literally, in their perspective, just turned right around and acquiesced to the House Democrats. And there are some sources who have told me they see this as a crushing defeat for Shapiro and just makes him look terrible. Shapiro is billing this as, I'm trying to find compromise. We can't hold up the whole state budget because of this, school choice issue, and that we could consider other legislation to do it. And as a matter of fact, he said, why are we going to do this when we don't have enabling legislation for us to spend the money? But that's kind of a cop-out because the enabling legislation could be one of the code bills. And there's plenty of things that don't, again, in the budget, don't technically have enabling legislation until they pass those code bills. So there's just a lot of, hand waving occurring here that's trying to, as some critics say, give the Democrats Shapiro specifically, a backdoor out of this quagmire that he's found himself in.
Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Kristen Smith, this is Anthony Hinnon. Please subscribe, and thanks for listening.